when you design a space in a certain way, you are dictating the way the human being interacts with that space.
Thank you so much, Claudine, for that. And as we do look to the cities of the future, the EcoMetropolis is emerging as a visionary urban planning approach designed with both the needs of people and planet in mind. And so, Nadia, we're excited to have you to talk a little bit about that. You know, how do we think about both the needs of people and the needs of our planet? What does a thriving eco-city look like? And particularly, let's start with thinking about in today's ultra-urbanized, interconnected world that we live in, nature is becoming more and more important to people. So how are you designing developments that really have nature at the very heart of them? And why is that important?
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for taking the time out to be here with us. So I think, you know, we're all looking at creating communities and, like you said, these cities of the future. For me personally, I think when we're looking at designing a community, for me, I always start with communal spaces and nature first, which I know is not very typical of developers, especially here in Dubai or in the UAE. I think, you know, as developers, we have a lot of fear around the market cycles, and so we're very focused, commercially driven on the revenue generating assets, which is normal. I mean, we're all entrepreneurs, we're all looking at the bottom line. But it's usually an afterthought. So, you know, they're focused on the houses and then they kind of forget about everything else. Us as a company, we look at it completely differently. So we look at where human beings are going to be communing, what do green spaces look like, how do we actually encourage, okay, you know, you can make a beautiful park, but how do you encourage people to actually go out there and use that space? So with Al Barari, for example, 70% of the community is green, but you know, I started to walk around and realized there weren't that many people actually outside walking. And so, you know, we started to encourage the community by creating cycling tracks and guiding them and painting tracks on the and trying to get people out there. Also, we find that when we engage the children, the whole families come together. So we have a lot of natural play, a lot of outdoor. We have an amazing outdoor gym. So we always think about how human beings are going to be interacting with this space. And then within, you know, because the social element of a community, yes, it costs you more money in the short term. It does. But in the long term, you know, all of our communities, whether it's Al Barari or, for example, I have another building in JVC called Harmony, it's also trading at 20% premiums to market, and that's because also on a smaller scale, that building has great amenities. You know, it has a gym that's not in the, you know, without sunlight. It's got a gym that's beautiful, that's been thought out. It's got an amazing pool. So I think in the long term, I think developers really need to change the way they approach design and think about communal spaces and the human element, how design actually dictates how we operate in our daily lives. And then within the houses themselves, also we look at how are we bringing nature in. So whether it's a courtyard or whether it's that amazing bathtub that has an amazing window and you're overlooking the garden. I mean, taking into consideration privacy too, but that, you know, when you're waking up in the morning and you're in a bathtub and there's a beautiful view, it's you start your day right, and nature has such a strong impact on the way we feel. So yeah, I would say definitely communal spaces, social sustainability, and bringing nature in is it's a design process.
100%. And, you know, you talking of how it makes people feel, you know, designing spaces actually how you do it, how you design those spaces impacts human health, doesn't it? It has a major impact on our health and well-being. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that we do design spaces that are really good for us, but also at the same time have energy systems that are going to be really mindful of the planet as well, environmentally?
So I found that, there are many things we could do within a home. So as much as possible using natural materials, so natural stones, non-toxic materials, non-toxic paints. These things affect our breathability, the air quality, even circadian rhythm. So how your hormones react, for example, is a function of our lighting systems. So there are many lighting providers out there today that give you lighting that doesn't emit blue light, or that the settings change at sunset. So we look at these things, but like you said, it's a balance also between what's good for the health of the human beings, and then also, like you said, the impact on the environment. So we sometimes, I think I'm personally very, very passionate about sustainability. So I find myself at these conferences and I'm like a kid in a candy store. Oh, we should do this and we should do that. And then I have my finance guy going, no, we can't do that. But also, more importantly than the commercial aspects, which we can touch on later, it's really also important that you think about the usability of what you're providing, because, I can give you an example with Alberari. In 2006, we put in underground bins with suspension that were all about recycling, so you had to separate everything, and nobody was using them. So it was, an investment on our part, but at the end of the day, there was no point if no one was actually separating their trash. And so I think we were ahead of our time. So you always need to kind of balance how to make it easy for customers. There are small things you can do, like, sticking an air filter in the shower, which is easy to use. They don't even know that it's there, and you're reducing your water consumption substantially. So we try and do things like that, kind of walk before you can run.
And that brings a really important point as well. Thinking about sustainability, there is a culture shift and a culture change that needs to happen, not just from your part as a developer and from the design perspective, but from, like you said, from the user, the end user perspective as well. And so what part do you think developers and designers have in really kind of pushing for that culture change? How does it work? Does it come from the user, or does it come from the designer to the user?
I think it's a bit of both. I think, like I said, at the end of the day, when you design a space in a certain way, you are dictating the way the human being interacts with that space. So there is that design element. And then, with us in the UAE, we're very lucky that we have blank canvases. Like Alberari is, 15 million square feet. So you're not just building one building, you're actually creating a community. And when you have that critical mass, and when you have those stakeholders that you can communicate with on a regular basis, you can also influence the way their lifestyle changes. You can. And it is a responsibility of developers to encourage, we have a small, I can see some Alberari residents in the audience. We have a space in Alberari called Nature Escapes, for example, where children go and spend a lot of time in nature, and they have their own farming patches. And, when the children go out there, the mums come, and then eventually the dads come, and that awareness and, also that element of play, bringing that element of play and reminding us to slow down and just play a little. So there's subtle ways in which you can't really force it upon our clients, but there's subtle ways in which we can bring that awareness to our clients. And I've seen it happen over the last 15 years.
Something you're also working on is Zuha Island as well. Yeah. Tell us more about that and how that is really bringing sustainability to the fore.
So with Zuha Island, it's not my first rodeo. I can see some people here from Abu Dhabi as well. I developed Nurai Island here in Abu Dhabi. I made many mistakes. I learned, valuable, some very expensive lessons. I think with island development, it personally really lights me up because you've got more autonomy. No offense to any regulators here, but when you're off the grid, you have more maneuverability, you can do more things. My engineering teams get more excited. For example, with Nurai Island, we ran out of space for solar, so we had the region's first floating solar power plant in the sea, which was fun. We're like, we have no space, let's just put it in the sea. So there's, you've got more autonomy.
Floating solar power plant.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. So with Soha, it's in Dubai. It is on a man-made island, just to put it out there, which is not the most sustainable thing. But it's how do you take what's already there and improve upon it. So we're doing things like we're engaging the youth of Dubai through an organization called Pirate Surf. I'm sure you're familiar with them. So we're engaging the youth, and we're doing like a biomimicry where they put oyster shells. They're going to go and kind of transplant them near the island to encourage sea life. That's actually happening this season while construction's undergoing on its way. We are doing things like, for example, we're going to have a lot of solar. We're aiming to have 70% solar. That's the aim. But, we have hybrid generators. It's a necessary evil. But one of the things, for example, we're looking at is efficiencies of those generators. So the heat output from those generators is going to be used towards the district cooling. So it's all those things where you can really, you have a lot more space to play and experiment with things.
And so, looking at all of that, it's very exciting. But how do you reconcile creating something like that with economic viability? Do you feel like there's a conflict between making something sustainable and environmentally friendly and it being economically viable? How do you where does the cost get absorbed?
You sound like my CFO.
Yeah.
Look, for sure. I mean, I think definitely it costs more, but at the end of the day, clients are becoming much more aware, and they're willing to pay more to be in a sustainable environment. So there's a portion of the cost which you can pass on to the ultimate consumer, but not all of it. At the end of the day, margins are brought down, but not significantly. And we need to, I think all of us in Dubai or in the UAE at large, we're a young country, we're young developers. We need to start maturing and start taking a 10-year view and stop living in fear of the cycles. And when you do that, it starts to make sense. So that's one thing, you just need to take a call as an entrepreneur and say, no, you know what, I'm going to lessen my margin, but in the long run, you build brand equity, you build brand value, and that does turn into dollars at the end of the tunnel. But also, I would say, we're big enough that we get to tap into international sources of funds, and green money is cheaper money, and so you can offset a lot of those costs by tapping into those funding resources. Unfortunately, that's not the case for everyone here in the UAE, and I think that's one thing I keep urging, stakeholders in the government to look at. I think there needs to be incentives put in place to encourage more investments into sustainability and to make it more commercially viable. The banks don't give you any. I don't know if there's any bankers in the room, but green money should be cheaper. It's just it's the way it is all over the world, and we really need to start looking at that, or put in some kind of whether it's banks or government incentives to encourage more of us to be doing more sustainable.
Yeah, it's important to look at the whole ecosystem, and see how we can support developers, entrepreneurs, startups, or whoever is working in that space, because it's critical, isn't it? And so that would be my final question to you. You're a mum of four. Where do you want to see the future of sustainable, environmentally conscious design?
I mean, I think there's so much, there's so much happening already. I think, there are lots of kind of, supremely conscious eco-villages around the world in less urban environments, whether it's Costa Rica, and there's a lot of experiments happening around environmental and socially sustainable environments. I think, for me personally, looking at Singapore, where it's very urban, and yet they have integrated nature very, very well in their buildings. You have breathing facades. It's really amazing and inspiring for me. I personally, for example, have started a school in Dubai where the children do a lot of biodynamic farming. So encouraging the future generation to, again, connect with the earth and go back to basics, I think, is a big one in terms of what I would like to see more of. And that kind of ties in with real estate development, because as you build communities and you have, I'd like to see a biodynamic farm in the middle of sustainable cities doing a great job, I think, in Dubai. Yeah.
Amazing things to come, no doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Nadia Zal, CEO of Zaya and Al Barari Group. Thank you so much, Nadia.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
For having
Thank you.
me.